Everyone's ready to go. I just want to say good afternoon and thank you for joining us for this very special webinar today on how credit unions can better serve Native, Indigenous, and tribal communities across the United States of America. My name is Tom Sakash, and I'm the manager of small credit union initiatives at Credit Union National Association, the National Trade Association for Credit Unions based in Madison, Wisconsin, and Washington, D.C. And we are thrilled to partner on this session with Inclusiv, who focuses on supporting credit unions and CDFIs that serve low and moderate income communities across the country. Our session today, which takes place in the midst of Native American Heritage Month, aims to highlight how credit unions have leveraged their operations to bring traditional financial services to communities that have sorely needed them. When we at CUNA think about diversity, equity, and inclusion in financial services, as you'll hear in a moment, Native communities and reservations make up some of the most financially underserved and underrepresented populations in the United States. And everything that we can do to encourage credit unions to serve these areas or to advocate for a more efficient chartering process with the NCUA so that these communities can establish their own credit unions, as we've seen, we at CUNA are absolutely committed to doing that. Our mission and vision at CUNA is to work for the day when all Americans choose credit unions as their preferred financial partner. And so we are very excited to offer a platform for credit unions who are already making that a reality for Native communities to share how they have gone about building trust and serving these communities in meaningful and impactful ways. We really do hope that their stories will inspire all of you who are on the call today to reach out to these communities as well, if you can, or to other underserved populations in your areas. I want to turn it over to Monica Copeland from Inclusiv to talk about the numbers illustrating just how big of a challenge that members of these communities face. So thank you, Monica, and thank you, Inclusiv.
Thanks, Tom. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. As Tom mentioned, my name is Monica Copeland. I'm the MDI Network Director at Inclusiv. And MDI stands for Minority Depository Institutions. Inclusiv, just for those who may not know or maybe less familiar with us, we are a national nonprofit intermediary. We're also a CDFI, a Community Development Financial Institution. And we're the network, we represent a network of about 500 credit unions across the country who are all mission driven and care about financial inclusion. So the subset of credit unions that I tend to work with are those minority depository institutions, some of which serve Native American communities. One thing I wanted to do is I'm going to share some stats with you next, as far as in terms of table setting, to just tell you sort of why this topic is so important, and we wanted to lift it up, but also give you some concrete examples of how your credit unions may be able to help. So looking at the numbers, this data is provided by the FDIC. If we're just looking at Native American communities, American Indian and Alaska Native households, 6.9% of the community is unbanked, meaning that no one in the household has a checking or savings account. And that's compared to 2.1% of white households. Another 25.1% of American Indian households are underbanked, meaning they do have a checking or savings accounts, but they're still using non-bank financial services, such as check cashers and other things. 11% of Native American communities or households use prepaid cards compared to 5.8% of white households, and then 10.5% use rent-to-own services, payday lenders, pawn shops, tax refund anticipation loans, or auto title loans, again, compared to 3.3% of white households. And, as you can see, there's a real need in terms of financial services. And there's a discrepancy too, as you see. And these numbers are sort of backed up and reiterated through Urban Institute data. 17% Native communities don't use checking accounts at banks or credit unions. The majority of the community are using high-cost lenders. 46% have subprime credit, and roughly 2.5 times more than majority white communities. And more than half of these communities have debt in collections, climbing to over $2,000 in 2020. However, like a positive note, according to CUNA Mutual Group's recent 2022 What Matters Now research report, Native American communities, Native Alaskans, and Indigenous consumers are the most likely to say, credit unions are their primary financial institution. So when they are using banks or credit unions, 21%, they are most likely to use credit unions. And then you can see the comparison with other demographic groups, such as 16% Hispanic, 15% for white and Black consumers, 14% for multiracial consumers, and 13% for Asian, Pacific Island, or Native Hawaiian consumers. The last thing I'll say as for in terms of table setting too is that even though those stats demonstrate, that there is a stark need in terms of being unbanked or underbanked in Native communities, there are existing Native American financial institutions throughout the country already serving these communities and doing great work. We just want to acknowledge that there are also organizations supporting these institutions, such as OISTA, who works with CDFIs and nonprofits. But as you can see with the images, the visual, there's several credit unions that are Native MDIs, minority depository institutions, several Native banks, and then over 60 CDFIs or loan funds. And then on top of that, there are communities who may not be Native MDIs or identified as such. They may be a non-MDI, but serving the Native community. And those are some of the credit unions we want to lift up as examples today during today's session. So I'm going to pause so I can turn it over to Tom to do some introductions of who we have today in terms of our panelists.
All right, thank you very much, Monica. So we have a couple of great credit unions on the call today who are going to share their stories about how they serve these communities. And I'm really thrilled to introduce them today. So first we have Helen Nickel from she is the president and CEO of Tongass Federal Credit Union in Ketchikan, Alaska. And just a little bio from Helen. Helen is an advocate for small community development initiatives. She believes financial education and local, affordable, and meaningful financial services for people and small businesses can result in building strong communities. Helen holds a Bachelor of Business Administration degree from the University of Alaska. She is an honors graduate of Western CUNA Management School, and she is a CUES certified credit union executive. She serves on the CUNA Small Credit Union Committee and is a member of Ketchikan's First City Rotary Club. In her free time, Helen enjoys community events, outdoor walks, and spending time with family. And Helen is joined today by two members of her team, Denise and Jade. Denise Hudson is the lending manager at the Metlakatla branch, and Jade Jordan is the assistant manager at the Metlakatla branch. So thank you so much for Tongass for being here. We also have on the line, we have Robin Miller. She is the branch manager at Black Hills Federal Credit Union. Robin grew up on a ranch in rural South Dakota on the Standing Rock Reservation. She's worked for Black Hills for 20 years. In September 2012, Black Hills Federal Credit Union merged with Cheyenne River First Community Federal Credit Union in Eagle Butte, South Dakota. From 2012 to 2015, she managed the Wall and Cheyenne River Member Service Centers until October 2015, when she started managing Cheyenne River full-time. With her, we have Nick Jensen on the line, the Vice President of Consumer Lending at Black Hills Federal Credit Union. Thank you so much, both Tongass and Black Hills, for being on the call today. So this is how the discussion is going to work. This is an open conversation with our panelists about how they've built relationships with these communities, how they've catered services and tailored services to meet the needs of these communities. And they're going to just share their stories about how they've gone about this journey. And so we're going to start off with some questions for Helen and for Robin, and then we'll move on to more detailed questions about the financial challenges that members of these communities face. So I'll start with the line of questioning, and we'll turn to Helen and Robin first. So first thing that we'd love to hear about your credit union, where it's located, asset size, number of members. And then also, as a secondary question, what factored into your credit union's decision to work with the Native communities in your area? So thanks very much, Helen.
All right, thank you for putting together this webinar today. It's fun to hear from other folks who are serving Native and Indigenous peoples across the United States. So Tongass Federal Credit Union is located in Ketchikan, Alaska. We are in Southeast Alaska, which is a series of islands, the Alexander Archipelago. If you get on a cruise ship, likely you'll come to Ketchikan. And Metlakatla, which is the only Native Indian reserve, is about a 12-minute float plane ride from Ketchikan, where our main office is located. We are about 160 million in assets. We have about 8,900 members at the credit union, and we have 9 locations, 4 of which are what we call community microsites. And those community microsites are located in small Indigenous communities on different islands around the area that we live in. The way that we ended up starting working with in Metlakatla was actually, we were just sitting here, one branch in Ketchikan, doing our thing, and Metlakatla Indian community leaders came over to Ketchikan after Wells Fargo had left the community, and they had no financial services. And so the leaders came over and they were looking for someone to open a branch, and they came up the stairs. I mean, our credit union was probably about 29 million, 30 million at the time. And they came up the stairs and talked to the CEO at the time and said, we need a branch. And she's like, well, we've never really thought about doing a branch. And they're like, well, we need financial services. And she's like, oh, okay, I'll help you start a credit union. That's the first thing she said. And they're like, no, we just want a branch. And so we went over to Metlakatla, that it was back in 2005, and we started opening accounts, and we would fly over there for the day and come back. And the community ended up saying, well, hey, you can open your site where the former Wells Fargo building was. And so we moved in there within a few months, and it was all in glorious 1970s gold and orange, and we did transactions from in there. And then over time, we ended up building up the branch, and then we received some CDFI funding in around 2010 and built a new branch in Metlakatla. So really, the way that we got started there was an invitation. And then after we opened in Metlakatla, we didn't open anywhere else for some time in Native and Indigenous communities until I became CEO. And I was like, just because, and we had a few other communities ask us to come in, and we had opened some other branches. But just because people stopped asking, I thought it's time for us to start going. And we ended up opening in 3 other not reservations or reserves, but in other Native communities in Southeast.
All right, thank you very much, Helen. And Robin, how about Black Hills? Can you talk a little bit about their journey in serving these areas?
So in 2012, in Eagle Butte, there was the Cheyenne River Community First Federal Credit Union. And I wasn't part of all of the back office paperwork, but I believe that credit union was struggling financially. They didn't have a lot of assets to back them up to help them get running. And NCUA contacted us and asked if we would be interested. And at that time, we came over and we merged with them. We merged. They at the time had 320 members, and we came up here and started an office, and we started in the basement of the housing authority. So we were actually in literally one little office and with 2 desks in there. And we were in there for about 1.5 years until we were able to get our own building. So that was kind of interesting, having extremely close quarters and trying to open up new memberships and get started that way. But when members learned that we were here, as soon as they, learned that we were a credit union and we're here to help the members, and the ladies at the housing authority were backing us up because they were the ones who wanted us to come here to help serve this community. And so that's how we got started, was in the little basement of a building up here. Currently, the credit union For a total, we have 94,000 members and $2 billion in assets. We currently have 15 member service centers, and two will be opening within the next 2 to 3 months, and then another one in probably the fall of 2023. So we are moving, and we're expanding out into Montana and Wyoming, and so yeah, we're on the rise.
All right, fantastic. Thank you for sharing. We also have a third credit union represented on the call today. We have Ron Moorhead, President and CEO of First Financial Credit Union in Albuquerque, New Mexico, on the call. Ron, we're asking each of our credit unions to share a little bit about their organization, but also a little bit about the sort of initial reasoning behind why you decided to start serving these communities. So if you wouldn't mind sharing those details, that'd be fantastic.
Certainly. Hopefully you can hear me okay now.
Yeah,
great. I'm pretty certain that over my my grave is going to be "You're still muted," because that's the last 2.5 years of my life. Thanks for putting us on. It was interesting to hear everybody else talk. That was great. We've been serving Native American communities since the late 80s, very late 80s. We merged with a credit union in the western part of the state, and then another credit union kind of left or abandoned their field of membership in the same area around about the same time. And so we kind of ended up in the western part of the state, which was right next to some Native American reservations. There's 22 Native American tribes within the state, and we have 19 Pueblo, 2 Apache, and 1 Dene, or maybe more commonly known as Navajo. And one of the things I want to be cognizant of is within our state, we're one of the few minority areas in the country. We have more people of minority status than not. Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and New Mexico. So we're very privileged to be able to serve other Native Americans and other minorities in the state. But the Native Americans many times live on areas that aren't very conducive to having large national financial institutions serve them. And so in one of our areas, we moved in and onto the Zuni reservation when Wells Fargo pulled out. And it was great for us. Why Wells Fargo pulled out, of course, is because Wells Fargo is Wells Fargo. And as somebody who used to run our league here used to say, you got to be suspect when a financial institution has a getaway vehicle in their logo, but enough bashing on Wells Fargo. They left, which gave us an opportunity to serve that particular area. And it's been very beneficial to us. When they asked us if we'd come out, the Native Americans, the Dene, asked us to come to another area. And similar to some of the folks here, we've got a branch that's in a thriving metropolis of about 600 people, and it's on the reservation. And so they invited us to basically take an area of this one convenience store. And so people ask, where's your branch in Pine Hill? It's like, well, it's right next to the Slim Jims and the convenience store. And everybody knows where the convenience store is. So we've been doing it for quite a while. And again, it's quite an honor to serve the Native Americans within the state. Because of all the things that have happened in the past, many Native Americans aren't terribly enthusiastic about trusting typical financial institutions or typical, let's say, more national organizations. And so it's taken us a long time to earn the trust. And we've done what we think was good work to get there. But the Native Americans have been very important in our ability to serve the state, because they're well over 20% of the population within the state. And so if you ignore the Native Americans within our state, you're ignoring a very large swath of people. What's interesting is that a lot of the folks that we serve, we're now on to grandkids, and the original members might have been the grandparents. And so obviously, if we're a couple generations into it, there has been some trust there, and part of it's just showing up. Like some of the others, you got to be there. a lot of folks that are in some of our rural areas, they prefer and they trust cash because they can go pay their bills and they can get a receipt that says you paid your bill. And so we have to have a lot of cash hanging out on paydays. And from our overall size, we're about 90,000 members and about 850 million assets. So we're decent size. We can do a lot, but that also means we have a lot of responsibility to serve people. We now have a little over 30 financial counselors that are certified. And we've been doing financial counseling in some of our Native American areas for decades. And that, I think, has helped develop the trust that is in part necessary. It's not just cashing someone's check or providing inexpensive services, but also helping them improve their financial well-being. And so for us, financial well-being is a really big part of it. But the other thing is, because there are a number of different Native American tribes within of close proximity, we don't want to treat anybody and just say, oh, you're Native American, because that's not fair. And each people group have things that are important to them, and they have their own identity. And so we don't want to broad brush things and just say, well, this particular group wants this and this particular group wants that. And so it's not a one size fits all. We make sure that we hire from the communities. And as often as we can, we like to hire people that speak the native language. That's very helpful. And that's another area of developing trust. When someone walks in, and people may be more familiar with the Hispanic community, but there's a difference between being bilingual and being bicultural. And if someone walks in and you can speak their language and you can help them with a mortgage application, or you can help them with other things that may be more difficult, again, it builds that trust. And for me, trust is one of the most important things that allows us to serve the people that we serve. We've got 5 branches that are either on or right next to Native American reservations. And they are some of our highest performing branches because there's loyalty there, and there is a sense of engagement. Sometimes in the urban areas, we also have Native Americans may be forgotten about. They're here, but they may not be very, I'm not going to say noticeable, but we try to carry the same idea of trust and service to the folks, whether they're urban or they're rural. I've got one of my managers from the western part of the state, Maggie, who's, I think, on the line, but I'm not sure if she's actually able to log in at the moment. I don't know if she's not able to actually, she had to call in. So
is she on the phone?
She might be on the phone.
Okay.
But she says that she can't speak because she joined by phone, so she's muted.
We can work on getting her access. Yeah.
Great. She has a little more she has more insight than I do on some of the day-to-day things, but I will say that there are certain days of the month, 1st, 15th, they're very busy days. And it's kind of funny, everybody likes to come in at the same time, 11 o'clock on Friday. And that's just because that's when it's available. So we have to try to ramp up to serve them, even though other days of the week you might be staying around, playing Frisbee because you don't have much to do. And so it's quite a challenge sometimes when you're in a small town and there aren't a lot of staffers. And I'm sure some of our other credit unions have the same thing. But I will say that the Native Americans are very patient, and they're much less likely to complain compared to some of our other members. They're fantastic to work with. And so I encourage anybody, if you're anywhere near or have Native Americans in your area, I'd encourage you to seek out and to partner with them, because they're absolutely fabulous as members. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, I do think that that's a common theme among the credit unions who are on the call today is building that trust, and the steps that they've, each of you have taken to build that trust as being sort of that first important step in serving these communities. And so I did want to give Helen and Robin an opportunity to talk about how they went about building that trust with those communities. I don't know if Robin, you want to go first this time?
So when we first came up here, we were in the, like I said before, we were in the basement of the housing authority. So the ladies that were in charge of the prior credit union definitely helped us out a lot, you know, by telling people, you know, they needed to come to the credit union and, you know, we're here to help people. And we got involved with Forban's Community Fund, and they're also here to, you know, help the people with loans. And they do a lot more loans now than they used to. But when you have a relationship with them, Forban's currently they have different programs, and like for every dollar that somebody saves, then they meet that dollar, and that can be used to purchase a home or for education, for continued schooling. And so they would open those accounts with us. And so that was, you know, part of the way that we started getting to know people. And, you know, when you're in an agreement with two communities, like two businesses like the Housing Authority and Forban's, those are two of the large businesses here that are here to help people. And so we're obviously here to help anybody that we can. And so the more people that we bring in, the more members that we get. You know, we'll have members come in and they'll be like, and they'll say to us, you know what, my grandma said this is the only place to go, or my cousin said this is the only place to go, or, you know, so it's word of mouth. You know, when you're really here to help people that are struggling financially. And, you know, a lot of people, like Ron was saying, tribal paydays, you know, they want to come in here and cash their checks and just go out with cash. But we've taught them that, you know, we have debit cards and we can print the instant issue debit cards here. They're active right away. So we've kind of tried to deter them from walking out of here with so much cash, because then in turn, we've also had a lot of members unfortunately get robbed. And we don't want that. You know, it's their money and you need to keep it. And so we've kind of tried to deter them away from walking out of here with so much cash. And so by having a checking account and that instant issue debit card, that's active right away. And they've gotten to the point where they really like their debit cards and they really use them frequently. So, and if they, you know, come in and they want cash and they tell us they're going to go buy a car, okay, that's great. But also when you're walking into a dealership with $10,000 in your hand, you can also get taken advantage of. And so we're like, you know, you can do a cashier's check, or, you know, there's other ways around it. And so we've tried to educate a lot on, you know, don't just use cash to pay bills. And I think that's been their way of thinking, is if they have cash and they spend it, then it's gone and they don't have it anymore. And I understand that, but there's other ways that, you know, we can help you with that. And we don't want you to be broke all the time. We can save money for you. And, you know, we don't want you to have to worry about paying your electric bill, or, you know. And so that's really educating our members is a strong point. I mean, because we really have a lot of people that come in here and they don't understand finances at all. They don't understand what a credit bureau is, what it means. They don't understand any of that. And unfortunately, we have a lot of people that don't know how to count cash. And so we help them with that. And so, yeah, we just help in any way that we can.
Thank you, Robin. And how about you, Helen? Same
Yeah,
question.
so when we first went into Metlakatla, we set up an advisory group, and I remember asking the CEO, I was like, well, how many people are you looking to have on that advisory group? And she's like, anybody who wants to be on. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, that's going to be a lot. But it turned out, I think we started out with like 9 people on that advisory group. And the important thing to us at that time was, what does the community need? What you tell us what you want, what you need. We're hiring locally, and so they help to really guide us with some of those initial, that initial setup and the things that we were doing in the community. They're the ones that helped us kind of get started with they needed taxes, so we provide the VITA tax assistance. They said we need help with taking utility payments. So we set up taking utility payments, and they were our first voice in the community. And I feel like the community, these are people they knew and they felt comfortable with, and then they had a voice with us. And then when they asked us to do something, it made a difference. It wasn't just okay, well, thanks. It was okay, well, let's see if we can do that thing. One of the things that we also did with our advisory group was, you can see behind Jade Jordan there, she's our assistant manager over in Metlakatla. And that logo was created by a local artist because the advisory group asked us to create something that was culturally relevant, for the community when we built the new building. And that one has actually got the Shamali language, at the bottom there, and also for credit union. So anyway, it was, I think that was really an important way to kind of be introduced to the community. As time went on, people stopped being as involved with the advisory group. And now Jade and Denise and Raz and the staff are our advisory group over there, but very well embedded into the community. In the other communities that we've gone into, as far as building trust, each one of our community microsites are located inside of a Native corporation building, and for free. They've provided us free space. We're in little office in one place. We're in a little in the canoe shed in another place. And I think partnering with the local Native organizations has helped a lot, because that they're part of what we're doing there. So that's how I think that we've grown trust.
And I think another strategy that I think each of you have employed is employing members of the communities that you're serving. Can each of you talk a little bit about the ways you've encouraged folks to apply for those positions, to actually attract and hire some of these folks from these communities that you're serving? Helen, why don't you keep going?
Okay. Yeah. So the tarot office, we post our jobs in the tarot office. And I'll let Denise or Jade talk more about it, because they're the ones who are doing the hiring now, not me, which I think is even better. Denise, do you want to talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, so I felt like TFCU hiring from within the Native community, instead of hiring from outside, it really helped to build trust, with the Native community. And I know that it's not something every financial institution can do, but TFCU really made sure to hire and develop the staff that are actually from the Indigenous community, because many Natives, particularly in the elderly Native population, they do carry some mistrust of people from outside. I feel like something TFCU has done to encourage people to apply here is to make sure to have competitive pay. We heard at one point that another major employer in town had raised their starting rates, and shortly after that, TFCU also raised their starting rates. And I think that really went a long way to hire good team members.
I'm really glad that you said the word develop too, Denise. Denise and Jade have both been with the credit union for over 10 years. And I'm sorry, guys, I can't remember exactly what it is, but they're solid, man. I mean, these women are amazing leaders in their communities. They're involved in their communities, and they're providing, they're the ones who are providing the services in their communities, and they know what we have to offer, and they know how it can help the people of the community. And so developing our people is something that's so important to me. And so I'm glad you said that, Denise. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. How about you, Robin?
We obviously, we of course want to hire, anybody we can. We advertise on Facebook, it seems like is where we've gotten a lot of applications. I just post flyers around town as well. It seems like we post ads in the newspaper, but a lot of people, I don't know if they don't look at it, or I guess I'm not sure. The newspaper is probably getting to be a thing of the past instead of everything is electronic anymore. But you know, one thing we do, I believe, pay, you know, a little bit better than some of the other locations, some of the other businesses. So it's important to hire, you know, people around here. And we're a very rural community. So around here, you know, the closest town is like 40 miles away, which is another small town. So a lot of people have to drive, you know, to get to work. And I have to drive, you know, 40, 50 miles a day, just one way to get to work. So, but I think it is important to hire within the community, and, you know, because people come in here and then they know people, you know, and they trust you when it's somebody that they know and somebody that's been in the community already, you know. The one lady that I have here, we hired her away from Taco John's, and she had worked at Taco John's for like 10 years. And so then she came here, and everybody walks in and they immediately go to her because they already know her. And so it is extremely important to hire within it and hire somebody that they trust and that they know.
Absolutely. I mean, I do think that that's a common theme among each of you. How about you, Ron? How has your credit union gone about hiring from the community?
You know, so a number of years ago, for those that have been in the credit union space, okay, I've been in since the early 90s, we would sometimes get dinged by NCUA for maybe hiring people that their credit wasn't perfect. Well, you know, if they're not perfect credit, then why are you hiring them? What didn't matter, kind of, New Mexico is a very modest. Over 90% of our loans last year were in persistent poverty census tracts. That's just New Mexico. And so when you're dealing with poverty day in, day out, you lose your job in a rural area, your credit might become impacted. Well, let's say they come and find us and we want to hire them. They got everything perfect, but their credit's a little impaired. I don't care. I'm going to hire them. I'll take the nonsense from NCUA about risk, and I have ways of dealing with that. A lot of it is, you know, a teller's going to only get into you for a little bit of money. It's the manager, it's the senior manager, it's somebody who's got an IT background that's going to, you know, take you for a ride if you want. But they were very much that way. And so whether it was Native Americans, Hispanics, or anybody in the state that was in a rural area, if you lost your job, it might be hard to replace it, and that could impact your credit for quite a few years. So we're willing to hire if someone's, you know, as long as it doesn't look like they're just, you know, writing paper all over town. But if their credit's impaired, I don't care. And that was one of the challenges we had early on sometimes just finding people. This is before the COVID situation. One of the first things we do is, if we're hiring from the community and the community has got financial challenges, well, guess what? The people we hire are going to have financial challenges. And so I'm looking for all those other things. We can teach people how to manage their money. That's something we should be able to do. And so we've got, again, trained financial counselors that will help with that. You know, and so, for example, we had payday replacement loan products. Well, some of our employees would utilize those payday replacement loan products. And so they would come in and say, oh my goodness, you've got people that are, you know, they can't manage their finances. I'm like, well, you don't really understand what the rest of their family situation is like. And the thing is, if they're taking out that product with us, then we can help them and make sure they get the right kind of support. You know, a lot of people that end up in payday products are because they have an emergency and they don't have time to deal with it. And it's not that they're bad people, they just might not be great at managing their money, or life happens. And so, but then you tell people, and then people find out that, oh, if you go to First Financial, they're gonna help you and they're gonna take care of you, and they're not gonna judge you, whether it's to get a loan or to become an employee. That helps. We just would, you know, do the typical, you know, Indeed ads or run ads in the local areas. like with everybody, it's become more difficult the last couple of years because when the juice shop down the street's offering $2 an hour more than we are, but we got benefits and they don't. Benefits don't put food on the table and don't pay your rent. And so even though we've got a pretty good benefit package, we've had to really ramp up how much we pay. And we're going to pay someone in a rural area the same amount as we pay in an urban area. And maybe you can make a little more money in an urban area, but so that might mean maybe we're a little higher than some in some of the rural areas. But there's a lot of good jobs out there, just sometimes they're not full-time jobs. And so we're trying to compete against maybe temporary seasonal jobs that pay a lot. But we try to pay toward the top of the range. And even then it could be a challenge because once somebody works with us and is in our system, they kind of get to know the other benefits that we have, and pay is one of them. But we're thinking in the future we may have to rethink our strategy on time off, because a lot of folks that are younger really value time off more than a lot of other things. And they value their time, and maybe because they lost their job during COVID, they found out that work's not everything, that there's more to life than just going to a job. And so we have to respect that, and we want to make, while they are working here, we want to make sure their time is well paid for. But it's been a challenge finding people that, especially part-timers. You want to hire full-timers a little bit easier, but there's times, again, because of the ebb and flow of the work, sometimes we want to hire part-timers, and that's a really hard one to fill. If you got universities nearby, it's not as hard to find a part-time people that they're going to school and working part-time makes sense to them. But if you don't have a university nearby, sometimes it's more challenging to find those part-timers. And I've got one of my managers, Maggie, who our firewall was blocking her from joining. So I don't know if she can actually, if she's able to at some point join in. I'm sure she'd have some good words to say about hiring folks. But we, at times we'll put up signs, or we'll put up, tell your friends and family, and some of our best referrals come that way. But it is a struggle these days, much more so than it was, say, 3 or 4 years ago, pre-COVID. That said, when you're in rural areas, there's a number of, I thought at one point rural areas of New Mexico were very different than everybody else. But then I was up in the Seattle area pre-COVID and found out that rural US is rural US. Everybody's got challenges. I don't care what state you're in. Rural US was impacted after 2008, 2009. And those towns sometimes have just been decimated. And so sometimes there's not a lot of folks still left to even hire from. And folks traveling long distances. We've got folks in some of our branches in smaller towns, they're traveling 40 or 50 miles to come to work because that's the nearest good job they can find. So you better make sure you pay them enough to make that 50-mile commute.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good lead into the next question about branches and about tailoring your organization to meet the needs of these communities. So we've talked a little bit about building that trust as an important first step. We've talked about hiring from the community as another important step. But how about tailoring your credit union's products and services to meet the unique challenges of the members of the community? And so that could be having branches in places that are accessible to the communities. That could mean having products and services or financial education programs that meet their financial education needs. What are the things that you each have done to sort of shift and sort of reshape how you offer financial services based on the needs of these communities? And I'll go back up to Helen here.
Okay, yeah, I would like Jade to answer that question with regard to financial education, and Denise to answer it with regard to lending and our accounts.
Thank you, Helen. I feel like one of the things that we've done really well here is make strong relationships with each of the schools. We started out with the school savings program, and that evolved into our financial literacy for youth program. We have like grab and go curriculum, basically, that any one of our branches can set up a visit with any grade for basically from kindergarten up through 12. And for the past 5 years, we've been meeting with the junior and senior classes specifically, and we have seen a big impact in our the youth in our community starting their credit building journey young, which is stellar. We have a lot of kids in the fisherman business from a young age, and for them to be able to take their business and their knowledge of finances right before graduation, and to see them be successful right out of high school is very great. And to know that we had a hand in helping them. We also have a few certified financial counselors within the credit union, and I'm one of them. And I have definitely seen the credit union difference in action with several of our members, where we have gotten them out of payday loans and gotten them a significantly lower rate with one of our products. That kind of segues into Denise talking about some of our loans.
And
Success.
just before Denise does that, Jade, thank you for being succinct. But Jade and Denise are both trained in the Building Native Communities financial education from OESTA, and they've told me that it's good stuff. So I'll let them.
Yes, OESTA has so many good resources that are tailored to the Native American population. So we're really grateful for all the resources they offer. So going back to the products or services that are tailored for the Native communities, I feel like in the Native community, and it sounds like it was similar for you, Robin, where cash was king. And we kind of had to train our members to not be so wary of our electronic options. Throughout the years, we've kind of trained them to use their debit cards more. So because cash was king, many of our members have always just paid cash for their big purchases. Many of our members are employed as fishers, and they earn a large sum of money at the end of the fishing season. And many of them would just purchase their new car with their money they earned in the fishing season. So we've slowly helped our members establish and build good credit scores and good history with one of my favorite products. It's our credit builder loan. So that's where we lend. It's a small $500 loan. We lend the members the $500, and that $500 is deposited into a secured savings account. And the member makes regular payments for a period of 6 months. And once they paid off the loan, TFCU releases that $500, and the member could spend that however they wish. Through those tiny $500 loans, I've really witnessed it help build and establish some good credit history for our members. The other thing is, in Metlakatla, because a large portion of our community work as fishers, due to some interesting rules in Metlakatla, the community members who fish in our waters, they don't have to pay or file taxes on the income they earn from fishing. So that would be a challenge if we're trying to get proof of income. However, TFCU will use their fish tickets as proof of income to be able to approve loans for members.
Wow, that is a very unique way to underwrite. I'm sure that not a lot of credit unions could claim that they also do. So thank you so much for sharing that. How about you, Ron? Any ways?
Wow, Denise, I am stunned. That is awesome. That is a story that our underwriters are going to hear in about half an hour. We also have a lot of people that are artists and artisans, and their income is variable. Certain times of the year, they may make a lot of money, and certain times of the year, they're not making much at all. And so we recognize that and realize that. And yes, income that's made on the Native American lands might be difficult to track in a sense, but we also sometimes recommend to our folks, hey, you know, if you deposit the money here, even if you're not paying taxes, but if you deposit it and then withdraw it as you need it over time, we can see that it'll help us in the future to make sure that we're not putting in a vehicle or making you a loan that you can't afford. I'm not saying we take stated income, but there's times when you understand that not everything that shows up on a credit report, you don't know all their income, you don't know all their expenses. And so there's times when we're just going to say, I'm going to make this loan, and I don't know how they're making their payments, but they're already making payments over here, especially when it comes to getting them out of predatory lending practices or other sort of, we're swapping out one car loan for another. Sometimes you have to go to plan B, and sometimes plan B is not as easy to document, let's say. But I like the idea of you know, some other method of marking what that might be. So one of the things that we do is we keep adjusting our payday replacement products. We've changed them like 4 times over the last 5 years to try to make sure that they're really hitting the mark and they're really helping people. Sometimes I feel like the dollars that we offer maybe aren't large enough. So there's still one hole we've got, which is when someone takes out a title loan. Because sometimes the title loan's on a vehicle, it's very old. Maybe it's a 6 or 8 year old vehicle, and maybe it's not even in, or it's older to the point where it's not even in any DA anymore. And so we have something called a clip loan. And what it really comes down to is we're coming on the front end of this. We don't have a lot of them yet, which is you go through our credit counseling, and then our credit counselor, after looking at your budget, is going to figure out how much we can loan to you. And we're still on the front end of that, but a lot of people pay their bills in cash, but then they get receipts. And so we could look at the receipts and say, well, how much, you know, you're spending this, you're spending that. Might be somewhat non-traditional. Other ways that we might, and I'm not sure if this is necessarily a product or service related thing, but we close the branches for feast days or for holidays, and we respect the communities that we're in to make sure that we're not open when we really should be closed because everybody else is taking the solstice or others are doing things that are, you know, make sure that way also our staff can participate in the activities. But one of the questions that had come up on the, you know, from the people on the call was that how well does some of the remote deposit capture and some of those things work for us? Well, part of the problem, and it sounds like it's other places as well, if you're outside of some of the major metropolitan areas or outside of some of the major roadways, you don't have cell service, or the cell service is like 1x. You don't have 5G, you don't have 4G, you don't have 3G. You have 1x, and that's not going to run a mobile app. And so some of the folks, they have mobile phones, but they don't really use them that much until they come into town. And so if they're already at the branch, they might as well just come in and cash your check rather than remote deposit capture. And so the mobile adoption isn't as big as maybe it could be or it will be once people actually get internet at their house or get the ability to have cell service at their house. And so there's a lot of, New Mexico is the 5th largest state by landmass. And so we have a little over 2 million people, 2.1 million people. So that's, there's not broadband everywhere. There's not a lot of that out there. So the technology is maybe not as utilized as much as people would like to, or it will be. But there are initiatives between the federal, state, and the tribal governments to try to put in more broadband, more cell coverage, but it's just not there yet. So that's one of the reasons why sometimes folks just show up rather than, you know, using some other method. We try to get them into things like, you know, deposit your check and use a debit card or write a check. And it is free. One of the questions earlier before that was, you know, what kind of things do you offer? We have free checking accounts. You have checking accounts that pay it back if you use your debit card. Because if we don't have something that's basically free, they may not want to use it. And that's anybody in New Mexico, again, because of the just relative financial status for everybody. You know, to ask someone to make a direct deposit of $500 or more to have free checking is just not tenable within New Mexico. So a lot of free going on. even free coffee sometimes.
Which is very important, obviously.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much. So I am, oh, Raman, were you gonna jump in there?
Sure. We have a variety of loans. We have numerous loans from pretty much any kind that you would like, from a share secured loan to what we call a quick pay loan. But how we've helped our members establish some credit is by, starting them out with a small $500 personal loan, or, maybe they have very challenged credit. And so we have a different type of loan, for that. But it's going to help them reestablish their credit and, build up their credit. We also have a program called our first time car buying program. If they have a little bit of cash to put down, we may be able to qualify them for a first time car buying program. So that's a vehicle up to $15,000. And if they have 15% down, we could get them into a car. So we do also offer ag loans for farmers and ranchers. So we have a huge variety of loans to help anybody that needs it. One thing we recognized, not only on the reservations, but anywhere in general, is people are living paycheck to paycheck, and that's just the way it is nowadays. And so if we don't help those members, somebody else is going to, or they're going to go to a payday lender and they're going to get charged 50% interest or some crazy amount that nobody can afford. And so that's where we've came up with, certain loans to help those, we don't want them going to a payday lender and getting taken advantage of. We want them to come in here, and we want them to help them. And so we've came up with small loans for those types of members, just to need it to help rebuild their credit, to get established. So we have every type of loan here.
Thank you very much for sharing. So I appreciate all of you answering my questions. I'm going to turn it over to Monica at this point to ask some final questions and to close us out.
Thanks, Tom, and thank you, everybody. We have been getting quite a few questions from the chat, so I want to try to address those for the folks on the line. The first one was about whether or not the recording and slides will be available, and Tom, you will be right. The session is recorded, and so those who have registered, we'll make sure you guys get that information. Somebody also asked about metropolitan areas. How can we better connect if they're in a large metropolitan area and they want to work with Native communities? Does anybody on the line on the session have thoughts about connecting with Native communities if you're not in a rural area? Perhaps, I don't know, Ron, maybe your headquarters.
One of the things you can do in Albuquerque, we've got, again, because we have a fairly large Native American population within the state, you can find their Native American churches. You can talk to folks there. And if you talk to some of the tribal leaders, they can sometimes, I wouldn't say make your, they're not going to say endorse you, but if someone asks, it's kind of like going to Catholic Social Services. If you're an immigrant, sometimes they'll know who you can go to not get judged and who's going to work well with you. And so if you talk to some of the tribal leaders, if you know that there are people in your community that maybe, let's say that there's a Native American community that's 75 miles from you, but some of those folks end up going to school locally. You might try to connect through the actual tribe and just say, hey, we've got, the ability to offer and just talk to some of those leaders, the governors, about how to best serve those folks, and they might be able to connect you with those folks locally as well.
Thanks,
So
Ron.
kind of like going to clubs, maybe.
I think we also have a question about, some of your credit unions are working with people who speak the native language. So do you also offer disclosures in those languages?
That's a real tough one. I'm not sure what the rest of y'all do, but man, it is really tough because some of this legal stuff is you got to have lawyers look at it 3 different times, and the lawyers aren't. There are Native American lawyers, Native American attorneys. We've not done that yet. We've done it in Spanish, but we've not done it in some of the Native American ones yet. but we've been thinking about it. We just need to spend more time and find the right lawyers to help us do that.
I mean, is that the same for Tongass and Black Hills?
Well, in Alaska, I don't think that we're trying to revitalize native language because everyone speaks English. So it's not, it's not, as far as them being able to read the information we have, they are capable of reading it in English. But we are excited about trying to revitalize native language.
I was just going to chime in and say that there's not enough fluent speakers, unfortunately, left for us to invest in something like that. However, during this revitalization process, I do feel supported, not just by our CEO, Helen, but the board and the credit union. As she mentioned before, the sign behind me is in my own language. And even though we don't have something like disclosures, I have created some of our own material in our language. So we have a picture of the credit union and we have the words Wapdala, and it's something that we make available to teachers because there is a significant number of teachers who integrate our language as well as part of this fight to bring our language back. So thank you for your support, Helen, and it's amazing to see not just the language, but the artwork all over everything we do.
Thank you, Jay. We also have a question about agricultural loans. So I know you talked to some about the farmers, but are there particular like connections to other loan products that you're doing, like any work maybe with that USDA or other native to help them with the farmers with their agricultural loans? So do you have any special products on that front?
Not a lot of agriculture going on. If you can see behind me, that's what it looks like where we live. So not a lot of farmland. Or you can look behind Denise and see that, but you can see that ocean. And she already spoke to what we do for fishing, our fishers. And then also Alaska, we just received a very large grant in the state of Alaska for mariculture, which is something that we're building on here. But I don't have anything else to add with regard to ag.
We do ag loans here. We actually have our own ag department. And so, that the paperwork that they need is typically tax returns, personal financial statements. And that would be the same for anybody applying for an ag loan. But yes, we do ag loans here.
Great. And it looks like a question did come in from Karen Edwards, and I just want to give people a chance to hear that response. Helen, maybe verbally, like so they can hear. She was asking about transactional accounts, and then also whether or not you had special services for bill pay and direct deposit, and whether or not online banking. We've addressed some of the issues with broadband, but if there's anything you wanted to say on that.
I'm sorry, were you asking me? I did respond to her on the chat.
I know, but in case somebody didn't see it. And
Okay. Yes, so I'll let Denise. She looks ready to talk.
I'm sorry, were you saying, what was the question? I didn't catch it.
That's okay, Denise. I'll answer it. We do have a free checking account that comes with instant issue debit cards, and I think that that's a really since we've added instant issue debit cards has really helped a lot, especially in our more remote communities. So they're not waiting for 2 weeks for a card to come in the mail before they're able to access their funds. And I think that those debit cards have helped a lot alleviate some of the real cash heavy usage that happens in some of our communities. So yeah, those are, that. And then in my answer on the chat, I also mentioned our credit builder loans, which Denise has already talked about. That's just is probably one of the most valuable products that we've had that, to help people kind of begin to rise up and build financial their own financial literacy and understanding, and create a better future for themselves.
Okay. Also, are there any last words in terms of working with Native communities that you all would like to share in terms of kind of final thoughts, resources, maybe a favorite borrower story, just sort of so you can have your chance to close out, and then I'll turn things over to Teresa. Any last recommendations?
Monica, I just want to say that I don't want to come across like I'm the expert on this, but we have people in our staff that are really good at a lot of these things. And I know the big picture, but the details, if there's anybody has any questions about product, services, interactions, what we do, what we don't do, Monica, if you want to put my, email with when you send out stuff, just say, hey, you can contact Ron on this. We'll be glad to get you whatever answers later. One of the things I would do is I wouldn't assume, and it's okay to ask questions, and just make sure that when you're talking to people that, one of the things about intersectionality that I do not like is that sometimes when people think, oh, someone is an X, therefore I should treat them this way. Don't do that. Always ask. It's okay if someone says, identify as X, great, but you ask clarifying questions. Don't just assume that because someone is Native American, that they're all going to think the same way. They're all individuals. And even people, because even within the same tribe, you may have people that are closer to my age that think one way, and people that are half my age think a different way. So let's just don't assume, just ask questions and keep asking questions, and it'll be much better than if you just assume what people want. So.
Thanks. Robin, do you want to take a stab at any final thoughts?
I think it's important to get out into the schools, and start educating at a young age. We have accounts here. If they come in and put money in their account, we give them a prize or something. And, when they open up an account, and we have a little package that the kids get, and it's, has a little piggy bank in there for them to start saving. And so it entices, little kids to get excited about saving money. And, when you're going into the schools, and some of the comments from some of the kids are, well, my parents don't save any, so I don't need to, or something like that, but it's just really education, and helping them, come in if they ask questions, make sure you're thorough. We go through everything, and I have budget sheets, if they're interested, I go over the budget sheets, and some of them have came in and sat down, and they've asked me about, my grandma told me that you would come in here and help me learn about credit. Perfect, absolutely, I will. And I made a sheet up that said, if you borrow $500 at 5% interest, this is how much your payments are, and this is how much you're spending in interest. And I've taken that up to like a $40,000 vehicle. If you buy a car at 4% interest, how much interest you're paying, up to like 25% interest. And unfortunately, some people have loans out there that are that large on vehicles. And when you show them that on paper, they're very shocked, at how much a difference it makes and how much the payment makes. And so education is really key into helping them. So yeah, we are here to help any way we can.
Thank you. And then Helen, Jade, or Denise, any final thoughts?
I do have final thoughts. I think that I think it's interesting. It was interesting to hear Robin talking about being in the in the basement of the housing authority, and Ron mentioning this, this thriving metropolis of 600 people. And I think that I'd like to underline that, because I think a lot of times a credit union thinks they have to go in and do something big. That's not necessary. We just need to be there serving the people where they live. And so I would encourage anyone who is thinking about providing services, it doesn't have to be a big deal. When I go to these community microsites, I went to CUNA Indian Association and said, hey, is there a place you can give me for free where we can provide services in this small community of 850 people. And he's like, come here, let me show you our canoe shed. And he takes me down, shows me the canoe shed, and that's where we're providing services in CUNA. And that's the most fun one because it's the canoe shed, right? It's kind of cool. But Cake Tribal Corporation, they gave us an office in the downstairs of their building that wasn't being used. And we just brought in some mobile teller stations and started providing services. You know, it doesn't have to be a brand new building and we have to do things a certain way. Just go in and start providing services. They need it. They need access to, healthy, affordable financial services to help start building up their lives and, and financial education all the way. I agree with Robin. But it doesn't have to be a big deal, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You can start much sooner than you think, and it will not be as high, expensive, I don't think, as you think.
All right, I'm gonna turn the floor to Teresa if she would like to unmute and say a few closing remarks. Teresa is actually a state senator from Arizona, Ms. Teresa Hafley, and she's serving as Inclusiv Lead 2030 Fellow, but she's also working on a Native credit union project with us. So if you'd like to say a few words to close us out.
Thank you, Monica. And then also thank you to everyone who is a panelist here. I've learned a lot. So as Monica alluded to, I am an Arizona State Senator. I was appointed back in January. So the first day of legislative session is the day I was sworn in. So they just tossed me to the to the predominantly political environment, but it's been a huge challenge and I've enjoyed the ride. In this process, and back home, which is northeastern Arizona, I grew up on the Navajo reservation, a place called Comay Mesas, which is about 20 miles from Tuba City, Arizona. And Tuba City has a community that's pretty much really spread out, and the population there is about 10,000, I would say. I mean, they don't all congregate in one area, but in the town itself is probably maybe 2,000, 3,000. We have one Wells Fargo bank there, and the whole Navajo Nation is 27,000 square miles, and there's only 5 Wells Fargo bank branches on that huge area. No other banks for miles around, with the exception of one credit union that was in the nation's capital in Window Rock, Arizona, but they moved down the road just on the other side of the border of New Mexico. So this project has really opened my eyes to the strategies and the challenges of having access to a financial institution. And I have worked more than 20 years working with youth from 5 through 24 years of age. And I have worked with young parents. I have worked with the elderly community, with social services, behavioral health, the WIC program, pretty much the low income families throughout Navajo, throughout really within my community. And I have seen firsthand the challenges of people not really understanding financial security and about building personal wealth, which means something totally different where I come from. It's not a capitalist mindset, but it's good in the sense that you don't have to worry about where you're going to get your next meal. As you may know, Wells Fargo had these predatory practices in which they opened up accounts lines of credit for elderly. And that's where the Navajo Nation, there was such a huge impact that many of our older account holders became so distrustful that they took their money back out and they put them back into that age-old trading post money management system. So that has its own challenges, but what I'm so glad I was able to listen to Robin Miller's presentation of how they started out in the basement of a Navajo Housing Authority. That's what we have in my community. I would like to have a credit union in my community, and it's so wonderful because right across the street is the Hopi. There's a huge Hopi village, one of the largest Hopi villages. And so we're neighbors, and the Hopi Nation is inside the Navajo Nation. So we're keeping them safe, and we protect them all the time. But I think this is a great opportunity for a credit union to be established in my community. In Tuba City, there's only a Wells Fargo. I used to work as a human resource director within the school district there of more than 400 employees. And a majority of these individuals drive an hour and a half to Flagstaff, or in the other direction, an hour and a half, and they are credit union members. But that's such a huge drive. And then they also have a Wells Fargo account just for the convenience, that local convenience of having access to cash. So I think this is something that I would like to have an open discussion. I'm so glad that I was able to hear from Ron Moorhead, and I would really like to move forward with various strategies of how to make this possible. I see a lot of opportunities, so that's pretty much what I wanted to convey. And if anybody has any questions, I appreciate that too.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you all. Wonderful having you all today. We are going to try to gather credit unions who are serving Native communities or interested in serving. We would like to bring them together in a network form. It's still in the early stages, but we are gathering, credit unions. So if anybody's interested, we'll include that in our follow-up information as well. Tom, do you want to say anything before we close?
No, I mean, just to say thank you to Teresa for sharing, and to know that this is just the first conversation of many, and we will continue from CUNA standpoint to advocate, as I said at the beginning, for an enhanced chartering process, a more streamlined chartering process, so credit unions can more easily be established on reservations and in Native communities, because we've seen that that's a successful path to serving these communities as well. And so anything we can do to make that happen, we're committed to doing that for sure. So thank you all for sharing your stories. It's very inspiring.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.